Okay, let's get this rolling. This is the summary of meeting 8 for the Comedy Writers Colony Saturday Writers Group. And usually I've been posting video of the group itself, the classes, but this one I record on Zoom and the quality's terrible. So I'm going to start doing these as summaries anyway. There's a lot of reasons why. Particularly because other people are in the video and it's not fair to just film them and throw them on here. Even if I were to get a release, this is a workshop. So a lot of people who are trying to become professional comics, there's no reason for them to show their process or show things that are not cooked yet. And second reason is because I can't really control what I say or what other people say. It's a workshop. And this week was on transgressions. And when you transgress and those things get put out in public, they become public transgressions. And that's not really the point. In comedy, you're trying to control as much as you can. And so throwing it onto YouTube and letting that sort of rocket out into the world is not really the point of the workshop. So we're going to start doing these as summaries. And eventually these are going to be all produced modules anyway. So you just kind of got to hold on while we're working the way through the beta process. Start out with some housekeeping. That there's a Jeffrey Dahmer bit that I wrote based on our character work in the stand-up accelerator workshop. And I posted that in a Google Doc and let people jump in and make comments, add jokes, punchlines, veers to other associated topics, things like that. And there's, I think, almost 70 people in this group, and there's 150 in the other group, and 4 people jumped in. So we need to make sure that the things that I'm offering jive with the things that people want. But it's a good opportunity to go in and actually work on something as a group on a staff, like the way a staff would. So yeah, the mechanism this week, we did 2 things this week. We talked about transgressing as a comic, which is one of the sort of super offers that you get as a comedian. You get to transgress. And the other is pitching. How do you pitch into a writer's room with ideas, and then how do you pitch finished products? So we start with transgressing, which is this idea that there are all sorts of invisible restrictions around you as a human being, no matter where you go. They're constantly changing and shifting and appearing and disappearing. So when you're in the social realm, like in public, depending on where you're at, there are restrictions. That's one of the reasons why people like parties, is that they're public, but they're also private. And then people will take substances, and that erases a lot of the restrictions, so you can transgress more. So all these limiting lines around us. And that opens up a lot of potential for comedy, because when somebody goes past one of the lines, it releases energy, releases social energy and emotional energy, both positive and negative. And that's a great place for comedians to go in and feed. So comedians constantly do this. We do social and personal and intimacy and institutional and cultural transgressions, all with the idea of working towards comedy outcomes, comedy effects. Because there's 2 worlds here. There's the comedy world of transgressions, which is pleasurable transgressions, at least for a lot of the people who are watching, and maybe for the comedian. Not always for the transgressee, but if the transgressee gets too upset, then it breaks the comedy in a lot of ways. So, but over here is sort of normal, serious, dramatic world, and its use of restrictions and transgressions. And you need to keep them separate, because once they merge, if dramatic suddenly comes over and invades comedy, or comedy gets too deeply into dramatic, then dramatic wins. It's really hard to do comedy when there are dramatic or serious people in the room, or reacting and saying they've gone too far, and that it now has really harmful effects on people or the society or culture or groups. Comedy's not about real effects like that. Yes, there are times when comedy will have real effects in the social world, but it's not really the purpose of comedy. So comedians transgress for comedy purposes, to create laughter, to create pleasure, kind of an elation, this sort of feeling of, oh my God, what's happening, and finding pleasure in that. As a comic, you've got to get used to having the psyche of a transgressor. It's really hard to do comedy if you don't want to transgress. And that goes across so many lines, like even personal transgressions. A lot of people see themselves as comedians, not as clowns. Comedy is about personal transgression. If you want to keep dignity and be a comedian, it's really hard because people are always transgressing you and you're always transgressing back. So it's one of those things you've got to really work through, as a comedian. So we worked through a lot of this stuff and a lot of examples, a lot of comedians who make the art of transgression kind of most of what they do. Louis C.K. just came out with a new special called Ridiculous, and he's a transgressor. He's a transgressor in disclosure, like he breaks sort of the intimacy restrictions of what he'll talk about. He breaks social norms for how far he will go. He will say things that are beyond the taboo lines. And he gets mischievous about it. He has all sorts of ways of softening and selling this, which is something that comedians learn. If you're going to transgress, you have to do it in a strategic way that gets you the outcomes you want and doesn't get you attacked. They talk about cancellation, and that was, to me, I knew this would happen anytime Louis does anything now, like his cancellation comes up. And I saw a lot of criticism about this in the media. To me, it's kind of a tired criticism. It's partly because he never really put the issue to rest by making a really clean, clear statement and explanation of it. So it still lurks. But that was a real life, that was a dramatic transgression. That was in the real serious world that he transgressed against women. And over here in the comedy world, every once in a while he'll talk about it a little bit, but it's just too powerful to pull over here for him to do much with it and keep it comedy. It, again, becomes drama very quickly. So thinking about transgressions, where you want to do this, practicing these, getting used to doing them well, to release energy, but not to release the type of actual wounding and social harm and personal harm that happens so often now with comedy, because we don't separate those worlds very well. Partly that's because the internet and cable has merged public and private. And so all these things that used to have a singular audience now have all these multiple audiences. And every one of those audiences has its allegiances to certain restrictions and certain allowable transgressions and transgressions that go too far. And that's also part of the reasons why I pulled the class recording down, is I talked about some comics who are amazing transgressors, and I'm a fan of that art form. But it's not really fair to even quote their material if they're not there doing it. Because again, transgression is so kinetic. It releases so much energy that even doing it in a classroom doesn't sound right. It needs to be in a comedy club. And we've got some, down through history, like some great transgressor comedians. Most of our film comedies are transgression comedies about somebody breaking restrictions and unfair restrictions and becoming a rebel. America loves a transgression. We were literally born in transgression as a country. Throwing tea into the, harbor, all these different things that we did that we celebrate as transgressions against, unfair empire, the British and the king. So learning about transgressions, thinking about it is really important. And when I do this module, I have it very structured because it's just fascinating. I mean, you could literally talk about this for hours and hours and never finish all the subtext and the sub things going on within transgressions. So I encouraged everybody in the class to start looking back at their material or their ideas for stories or whatever they're working on as comedy writers and think about adding more transgression. I've also mentioned how, like in our politics, Trump and most of the sort of the MAGA movement is transgressive. Trump is a super transgressive. Whatever the rules are in the situation, he will go beyond them. He will break the restrictions. He will go and say things that other people won't say, that shouldn't be said there. He will do things as president that other presidents haven't done. because he gets a lot of the energy of transgression, and he likes that energy, and he's a pretty good transgressor. No matter what you think about his politics, the guy can grab all the attention by transgressing. I mean, even things like death. Like traditionally, presidents have been very super serious, super dramatic about, especially like military deaths and things like that. And Trump will even go after the, fallen soldiers and things like that if there's something about it that he sees that he can get a transgression in. So there's all that with transgressions. The second thing we moved to in the group workshop this week was pitching. So I kind of break the workshop into comedy mechanisms that you can learn that sort of you lace into all your scripting. But the second thing is like comedy as a profession. How do you do the writer side of it, this sort of professional writer side of it? And with this was pitching. Pitching is a really interesting area too, again, across many areas in life. In business, you're basically pitching customers all the time when you're trying to sell things. You're pitching products if you're an entrepreneur. You're pitching ideas to your boss if you're an employee. You're pitching the world all the time. And the definition of a pitch is that you have something sort of pre-made and you want other people to adopt it. So you're pitching it to them, why they should adopt it, why they should invest in it, why they should buy it. Why they should think it's a great story or a great joke. So the art of pitching becomes really important if you're going to try to make a living as a comedy writer. The first way that applies is in writers' rooms. You have to pitch jokes. You have to pitch punchlines. You have to pitch tags. You have to pitch punchline ideas. You have to pitch bit ideas, sketch ideas. Because the first way that creative is done professionally in Hollywood is in writer teams and writer groups, and they could do a lot of different things. There may be 20, 30, 40 different ideas amongst the group. They can only do one that day. So you're pitching yours, and with the idea that you need to get yours accepted consistently on the show, you need to get jokes accepted consistently to be used on the show, or you get fired. So you don't write all those jokes immediately. You don't write all those ideas, those sketches. You pitch the idea. And writers' rooms are great with that. Super fun to be in that environment. If you're in a good environment like that, where you feel a lot of sync with the rest of the writers, you enjoy the vibe of the show, and your mind works within the vibe of the show really well. But it's also pretty nerve-wracking and anxiety-producing for a lot of people. There are a lot of introverts who get into comedy in general, and especially in comedy writing. And the idea of having to verbally pitch really throws them off. So you get all these issues that happen when people have to verbally pitch in a writer's room, in a group. You get the extroverts, the big voices, the ADD brains who just blurt things out, and they end up starting to dominate the room. And as the head writer, you've got to keep them going because you want that energy, but you have to squelch it down so that the people somewhere in the middle will also talk. And the introverts may not talk, but they at least need the opportunity. And the way you deal with that as a head writer is if you know like one of the introverts comes up with good things in the moment, they just don't say it, then you just call on them. You pick them and say, what do you think? And then they're fine with it usually. So no matter what your psychology is and your psyche, you've got to be able to verbally pitch. But you also get to do written pitches. And again, a lot of the nonverbal or less verbal writers will just sit there and write jokes the whole time off what the other people are saying or what they're thinking. But they're sitting there doing writing pitches. They're just not saying them. And afterwards, when everybody goes to their rooms or the assignments and everything gets collected, then those things get into the pitch process as well. They're just coming through a written format. A lot of people are much better with written formats. When I start doing this writers group workshops online, we will have a chat function where people can constantly pitch, constantly write jokes. Because it's much easier for while people are talking, if you're just writing and it's appearing on the screen, it's not interrupting the flow of the verbal. So verbal and written tend to fight each other in pitching situations. The second major form of pitching, though, is when you already have something completely done or mostly done or at least formed up and you want to pitch it to other people. So think of screenplays or even full sketches or full bits where you've worked it out, at least for a really good, strong first draft, and you want to pitch it to people. And one of the guys in the class has a personal experience with a drug lord story that has never been harvested. It's a true life story. It's really interesting. And he pitched it to me this week online. And so we talked about it a little bit in the group. How do you turn that into a set of pitches that you can use with real network and production company people and studio people when you get access to them and they want to hear ideas? And that is a whole set of pitches. So it's a 10-second pitch, it's a 30-second pitch, it's a 1-minute pitch, all these different lengths of pitches because people will have different amounts of time and different amounts of interest. The first thing is having a 10-second pitch, like something that's just, as soon as you say it, it's just incredibly magnetic. And people are like, oh my God, what's that? And then it becomes a dialogue pitch where they're intellectually interested, emotionally interested, and they're asking questions. And that's the best way to pitch. It's much more interesting than you doing monologue. But if you do monologue pitching, you got to think of yourself as a performer, just like a stand-up or an actor or anything else, where you have to put together a really entertaining pitch. And this is the problem with most people when they pitch. And again, there's a lot of training we can do with this. This is just kind of a quick overview that they give information, and pitches really aren't that much about information. They're elements of information, kernels of information, nuggets that you need to give people. Like I just said, it's a drug lord story based in America. And so you want the elements, you want to have control of those elements, you want them developed and interesting, but you have to perform them in a way that keeps people connected. You can't just inform. You can't just, here's all the different elements, People can't absorb it that way. You have to turn it into a story, you have to turn it into scenes, you have to turn it into characters, even act out those characters so that they get to experience the entertainment value of it. So really, when you pitch, you're an entertainer. And some of the guys in the workshop have worked as entrepreneurs and trying to sell products that they've created, work for startups, things like that. And the entire environment is built around pitches, usually by non-entertainers. Not that some of those people aren't really good, because there are some really interesting founders that really get energized about their stuff, can really pitch it. But my experience has been 80% of the founders can't pitch at all. Like, it's boring to listen to them. You check out very quickly. And so it's an art form. And so learning to pitch, super important if you're going to be a professional writer. Okay, so that was the week. We did a bunch of stuff on transgression, a bunch of stuff on pitching, and everybody broke into sort of teams where they worked on their own transgressions and their stand-up or stories that they had, and other people sort of suggested new, even more transgressions to lace into the script that that person was working on. Come back next week. Anytime people want to come to the workshops are by far a more vivid experience, because I'm a live teacher. Like, I have been a professor for a long time, and I like in-person teaching. I know how to do that. Turning that into video and sort of online product, very different system. I'm ramping up for that stuff. But the live workshops are always free for the comedy writers and for the stand-up accelerator. So either come to the Creek on Sunday from 3 to 5, or pop me a note, join the Facebook group for either Comedy Writers Colony, the private Facebook group, or the private Facebook group for Stand-Up Accelerator. I know not a lot of people use Facebook so much anymore. Don't go to the pages. There are 2 pages for the same locations for Stand-Up Accelerator and Comedy Writers Colony. You want the private Facebook group where you have to request to be a member, and I'll immediately allow you in, and then you can get a lot of information about what's going on around Austin, where you can attend these sort of private workshops. That's it, and we'll see you next time. Bing.